Hello, good morning. It's a beautiful Sunday here in Waxahachie, Texas. I hope it's beautiful where you are too. It is the first day of spring, according to Gene Hudson. I wasn't aware either. In fact, let's double check that because we can do that now with the whole internet thing. First day of spring. All right, let's see. First day of spring. Yeah, March 20th. Look at that. Sunday, March 20th. Well, good job, Gene. Thank you for letting us know. MH 1953 is in the house. We'll give everyone a few minutes to hop on. I know I say this all the time. This will probably end up being quick. Just exhausted from the week I've had. It doesn't look like it's going to be slowing down anytime soon either. So, we'll give everyone a few minutes to hop on. I hope y'all enjoyed yesterday. I know I did. Lots of good discussion. Lots of oh, so Gene still has a foot of snow on the ground. Wow. I'm very sorry to hear about your sisters, Gene. I knew about Ruth. You'd mentioned that before. Well, and with Mary, at least we live in a time where that's an option, right? Even 50 years ago, so many things we wouldn't have been able to address, like with my son, my youngest son. It's like almost the perfect time for him to have been born because he was born just late enough for them to even know what his disease is and to work with him and to actually have developed some things. It's still early on, but it's very much a they've had a chance to experiment on some stuff, so the things are actually helping him. So I get it. And MH 1953. In fact, I'll go ahead and say this now. Hey, Susan. So the meeting went well, and a decision has been made. It will be announced in the future. That's all I can say. But it will, trust me, you'll know when we announce it. What else? I think that's just about it. I launched Choopy Rules finally. And so I got to start spending a lot of time advertising that and working on that. And I've got to do the artwork for Jessica Jones's show. And I don't see Batmom in the chat, so I'll respond. I did get her email, and that's being sent on. But yeah, other than that, I mean, things are going pretty okay. Just exhausted. Too many things to do. Too many irons in the fire, as they say. I think that's pretty much all I got for now. Oh, what is the last name of this month? I just realized. Calendar. There we are. March. Yeah, March 31st. Okay. So I will be sending the funds to Alan probably Friday afternoon. So this is the last week to send in any funds if you want to get them to Alan. Again, $5-10 matter. This, where he's at. But again, obviously, it's only if you can. I know how tight things are right now. And we can, of course, thank our lovely administration for that. So, but yeah, just as long as you get it to me by Friday morning, we should be fine. I'll send out that afternoon. Beyond that, I think we're probably good. And again, we will be doing communion today. So again, I do wine, and I do a red wine, and I do a tortilla, because that's basically the closest thing that you can buy to the type of flatbread that would have been used. But it doesn't matter. Like, you can, if you don't have again, I do because I like to stay as close to the original version of everything that I can. as long as it's within my realm to do so. But obviously, some people have a history with alcohol. Some people don't have it in their house. Grape juice is fine. A Coke and donuts works, right? It is the meaning over the function, over the form. But if you can make the form, match as closely as possible, that's cool too. So we'll be doing that at the end. And like I said, today will end up probably being a little short. And then I think in the next week we will be able to kick off going through the Apocrypha. And Thursday we go back to doing Hebrews. So we're going back to normal here. I will ask a question at the end of this show though. Hey Dave. Davy Jones's Locker. I like that. Welcome. I think this is the first time I've seen you in the chat. And of course, we have Lisa Liu. Welcome. So let's go ahead and open in prayer. We'll talk about Isaiah. Spring allergies are killing me. We'll go ahead and talk about that. Isaiah 13, and mostly I want to explore the idea. To show you how to explore the poetry of Isaiah, because there's a lot there, and even in the English translation, how it doesn't allow us to see what he's doing with the text from a poetic standpoint, right? That's a big thing we always sort of miss because of the language and nature of Hebraic poetry. So let's definitely open with some prayer. So MX 1953, it's Isaiah can be is confusing if you're trying to read it the way you would read a newspaper, right? Like, hey, Tex, it's one of again. So we'll talk about that on the other side of the prayer, and then we'll have some. I'll end with a couple of announcements and a specific question. Heavenly Father, we thank you and we praise you for all that you've done. Father, we thank you that you chose us for this time and this place. That you've brought us together to learn, to worship, to draw closer to you. And that you've chosen us for this time and place to stand for you, to be ambassadors of your kingdom in a place and time that is needed greatly. Heavenly Father, help us to learn to be given wisdom and courage to say the things that we must say, the wisdom to know when to say them. Help us to stand for your kingdom and against the darkness of this world. Help us to stay within your word and within your ways always. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. All right, so Isaiah. Yes, it was recently Tex's birthday. He is now 173 years old, but doesn't look a day over 120. And for that, I am very grateful because, that's how we get the numbers up. Batmom, just to respond your question yesterday, yes, I did get the tag. I did get your email, and I will be forwarding it on. So moving on to Isaiah 13. So this came up yesterday, right? About the idea that Isaiah 13 and Isaiah 14 are ultimately actually about Babylon the Great and the Antichrist, and that the king or prince of Babylon is actually the Antichrist. It's one of the things we sort of, and there was some stuff that was in there that I wanted to sort of talk about, because it gives me a really great example of how to use Blue Letter Bible, right? So y'all can kind of see me work through it, because it's a great resource when you're going through and reading the text. But also just sort of, it gives me a chance to explain a lot of Isaiah's poetry and the themes that he's working with, right? So just a interesting way of doing things. So let's go ahead and add. I will do that. And let's pop up Isaiah 13 over here. So Isaiah 13, as I mentioned before, is this is about the fall of Babylon itself, right? And at the end of it, at the end of the chapter, it talks about how, like, once it's destroyed, right? Down here it says, you know, it talks about how the Arabs will never pitch their tent there, and the shepherds will never, they won't keep their flocks there. It talks about how, but wild beasts of the desert shall lie there, and their houses shall be full of doleful creatures, and owls shall dwell there, and satyrs shall dance there. This is the King James version, because again, normally, if you notice, I've been going through the ESV because I just like the way it reads better, but I do like this because it does talk about satyrs, and the reason I'll talk about why that's important here in a second. So the imagery here is that, again, Babylon, which again, it's a dual fulfillment prophecy. So it is talking about Babylon, right? This all of these events took place. But there's enough weird things that's when you kind of know, okay, this is actually a dual fulfillment prophecy. We talked about this yesterday. Like, why is the Arabian pitching his tent there such a big deal? We talked about that. So it's indicative that this is a broader conversation, right? Nathan actually made a great analogy, because I talked about how it's a dual fulfillment prophecy is like when you're yelling at somebody, but you're actually yelling, but you're looking at somebody else because you know they're really the problem, but that's the person you're sort of addressing, kind of a thing, right? And it's he brought up the original Suicide Squad, right? Where Will Smith's character Deadshot is talking to Rick Flag, and thus far Rick Flag is the only one who's been talking to him, and he's looking at him, but Amanda Waller is standing over here. Now we know Amanda Waller is actually the boss. We know that she's really the person doing this, right? And he's talking at Rick Flag. And Rick's like, well, I have to come. He goes, oh, no. You think, and Will Smith's character, Deadshot's like, oh, no. I wasn't talking to you. I was talking to your boss, and points at Amanda Waller. Of course, the scene is showing he knows Amanda Waller is the boss here, right? He knows it. But so far, only Rick Flag was talking. So it's the same idea, right? Babylon is who God is talking to through Isaiah. And this is what he's prophesying against. But he's ultimately looking at Babylon the Great, right? And again, Babylon in the Old Testament becomes the symbol of evil, right? Of the world system in the Old Testament. That's sort of, and we see in the New Testament, that's why they mention Babylon all the time. It is the ultimate symbol of this world's power. Which is again why Babylon the Great is called Babylon the Great, right? And again, we've had the conversation. I would argue it's Mecca. I think when you actually read the text of Revelation, it makes it clear that it can't be Rome. But that's a whole other kettle of fish. I want to focus on Isaiah today. So, knowing that this is about Babylon the Great, ultimately, it makes some of these other verses make sense, right? So let's look at Isaiah 13, because it talks about how these wild beasts of the desert. And so why do we have wild beasts of the desert? What are doleful creatures? Owls randomly, and then we have satyrs dancing there. What's going on here? So we have this, and this is one of those wonderful. And of course, down here it talks about in verse 22, it talks about wild beasts of the island and dragons. Like, where's this all coming from? What's happening? Well, I'll start with the answers, and then we'll show how we get there. We'll show our work. So, the problem is, as I've said many, many times before, there is no such thing as translation. There's only interpretation. And that even works for English, right? Even, we are in the culture. Let's say you're reading a newspaper or you're reading a book, right? It's written in today's language. It was published recently. So it's in our context, in our language. there's a lot of nuance to words, right? So a word doesn't actually just mean a thing. Our new friend Miss Sloan yesterday actually said something really interesting about Hebrew. Said Hebrew is about what a thing does, not what a thing is. Absolutely true. So that's something we have to keep in mind. But going back to the broader idea of language, it is incredibly culturally connected, right? Everything is connected to something else. And so if you sort of have to study the cultures of the time and the surrounding cultures, and then idioms and contexts, because these things change. The Bible's written over 1,000 years. Like there's a lot going on. So it's something that applies. The New Testament is not going to apply in the Old Testament necessarily, as far as context. And then sometimes in the New Testament, they will pull something out of the Old Testament. So because they understood the Old Testament context, the New Testament contexts can change. So it gets complicated real fast. And so in doing so, when we're trying to translate this into English, which English functions very differently from Hebrew, has different assumptions, different worldviews, particularly modern English, um, it's we lose a lot of the poetry and the analogies that he's doing. So actually, what is happening here? Well, in Isaiah 13, what he is talking about, these are demons. These are not owls. These are not necessarily, they're not he goats, as some translations will go for instead of satyr. They're not jackals. And I understand why people have done that. They're like, okay, well, a lot of this language is for desert stuff, right? Well, jackals, that all makes sense. And it looks like it could be connected to this ancient word. But again, it's because you're oftentimes things are looked at in isolation, right? And what's really happening here is he's talking about how it's going to be so desolate, and because it's so evil, right? It's just full of demons and evil spirits. And we do need to point out, this would be a great time to point out my constant loathing for our lack of appropriate language in modern Christianity for dealing with the supernatural. We only talk about angels and demons, and that's fine if we want to use them as like angels are supernatural beings on the good, demons are supernatural uh you know forces on the evil side. That's fine. The problem is we sort of assume that that means everything's the same kind, and they are not. The world, particularly to the Hebrew, were full of different kinds of spirits, of spiritual beings, right? And they we sort of have this binary system, and they didn't look at it necessarily that way. Um, they had different levels of beings, of supernatural beings, and of course, most of them um, were. Sorry, I just saw Titan's question. I was mid thought, and I completely amtracked. So yeah, different levels of beings. Some are good, some are bad. And so, but they all have different connotations. But specifically, the demons that possess people, those are the dead spirits of the Nephilim. But then we have other creatures that were created. They are supernatural beings. They were created. That is their realm. They have authority over it. Um, and that is one of those things where we don't tend to look at it that way, and so we are much the poorer for our conversation. To answer Titan's question, actually, here's the thing: he's not using demons or using animals as demons. Although, yes, that is a thing. Um, it's often referred to as I just forgot the word, personification. Right? Like again, why are angels in the Old Testament stars? Well, because that was their personification. It was, hey, there's stars up there. Up there is where God is, because it's above us. It's a world that we don't inhabit. So the stars became personified as angels. Leviathan is a personification of Satan, and we'll talk about that here in a second. So here's the thing: the reason it reads this way in English, that they are animals more often than not, particularly modern translations, is that we have a very incorrect view of what's happening here on a textual level. Our culture is radically different. So we're thinking, oh, he must mean literal animals, right? He's not. These are all demons. These are all different types of demonic entities that he's referring to. This is why satyr shows up in the King James. This is why dragon shows up in the King James, because they were the best English words they had, but that's not what he was actually saying. It's not what Isaiah wasn't thinking a literal, say, well, maybe he was. You know what? I'm not even going to say that, but like dragon is actually it's more of a demon. So let me show you my work here, right? Because you're like, okay, great, Jason, you've said this, but why should we believe this? Why should we believe that these are demonic forces and entities and not what the modern scholars have said? Well, for that, we go to the text. So let me pull it up here. So let's actually, so satyr, right? This word. So we're in blueletterbible.org. Again, I love this program. It's an online, it's free. Right here. So you would type in like Isaiah 13:21, just go to this section specifically. But you can just type in Isaiah 13 or Isaiah, and you can go through, you can select things, all kind, fun stuff. You can select the version you want to read it in, right? Including the Septuagint. So you can actually read it in the Septuagint or the Vulgate Latin. So the only thing is I don't read Greek or Latin. I'm lucky to read English. So King James version, just because I like the fact that it actually does use satyrs and dragons. Anyway, so you select the text and this pops up down here, right? So we come down here. We'll do this one because the dragons is probably the easiest way to look at it. So I'll select 13:22. Boom. We get the Masoretic text here in Hebrew, and I can actually click on, and it'll show me which section, down here. I can pick the word, right? And open up in Hebrew. And I can also come down here, and they have the Septuagint as well. Now, it isn't as clean as, it's sort of, I wish they would do the same thing for the Septuagint, but, it is what it is. And you can just sit here and go through, and you can look at over here on the right-hand side, right? Like, what is this? You click on it, boom, pops it up. Now, what's interesting is this will say, okay, it's a verb, but there's no Strong's information. You can just hover over it and it'll show you. It's like, oh, this is from the root. It's a noun, right? Okay, no associated Strong's. Well, what you can do is you can copy this, just highlight and copy it, paste it into your, like say Google, which, we'll come over here. I can actually share this step. I learned this today. I am so happy. This makes my life so much easier. Boom. And then there you go. Right? You can actually highlight it and you can see it. And it'll tell you what, and you can sort of look up these words. Just a way of doing things. So let's go to dragon, right? Where did we go? Here we are. Dragons. Now, we go over here. We want to check out the Hebrew version of this first, right? Well, this is the word tanin. Again, Texan, do not ever trust my pronunciation of any Hebrew word. Don't even trust my pronunciation of anything in English. I speak Texan. Now, you're going to find something really interesting here. Dragon, serpent, sea monster, dragon or dinosaur, sea or river monster, serpent, venomous snake. It's like, whoa. What's going on here? This seems to be a really, and down here it's like they'll even say things like jackal, right? Well, how in the world are you getting jackal and whale? Or sea monster and whale makes sense because again, that's how the Hebrews thought. Like they wouldn't have looked at a yak and a buffalo and a cow as they would just call them all cattle because again, it's about what it does, not what a thing is. So whale, sea monster, sea serpent, you can kind of see what they're saying. Okay, these are big water things. When you're dealing with Egypt and it uses Tanin, it's talking about the Nile crocodile. So how do we get jackal here, right? How is a sea serpent and a whale like a jackal? Truly, the answer is they aren't. They're not at all the same. The reason that the word jackal shows up is because there's an ancient root, or there's I think it's Ugaritic, or an Aramaic version, I forget which one it is, that sort of connects to jackal. So like, well, maybe it's a borrowed word is sort of the idea. But everywhere else we see the word Tanin. It's associated with a water monster, right? It's the large water creatures. And here's where the poetry of Isaiah comes into play, right? It's sorry, I just saw Gene Hudson. Oh yeah. I actually I have that character sketches. Yeah, my parents bought it. They went to the same seminar. I have the books here right above me, actually. So Tanin are water monsters. Earlier in the book, Isaiah uses Leviathan, right? Which again is the personification of Satan. And in the context, he's using Leviathan as a stand-in for Tiamat. Tiamat is the biblical chaos Kampf monster and goddess that is who's destroyed and whose body is used to make the world, or is it life on the world? Anyway, the Ugaritic text is different from the Mesopotamian version, and that they get confused. But basically, the chaos Kampf is that there is a water chaos dragon that is slain and who is used to make the world. Well, Isaiah plays off that idea. And one of the key things here is he's clearly using Leviathan as the stand-in for Satan. He's using Tiamat's story, because again, Babylon is evil. Tiamat was a Babylonian goddess. And it was their chaos Kampf. And it's Titan. You know what? I'll have to look that one up for you. Yeah, I'll have to look that one up. Don't want to knock everything over at the moment. So one of the things he's doing in the thing that the Hebrews would have known is Tiamat was also known as the glistening one or the shining one. Okay, so if you're a Hebrew speaking Israelite at the time, you know Tiamat is the glistening one. You know he's saying Satan or Leviathan, who is a stand-in for Satan. He's like, okay, you're making the connection, glistening one, shining one to Satan, and we know that the serpent in the garden is a triple entendre. Snakes don't talk. They don't have legs. So why is he using a serpent? Well, because it's a temple. The Hebrew word there is a triple entendre. It can mean to entice, to intertwine, right? That's a word often used for magic. It can also mean as a noun, sort of like the shining one, right? Thank you, Gene. It's a shining one. And so if you're a Hebrew reading this, you're like, oh, I get what he's doing here. It's the serpent, right, from the garden, the glistening one, this angelic being, which is they knew, they overbuilt, that this was an angelic being because from its context and the triple entendre. Isaiah is taking that idea, right, and is saying, hey, Leviathan stand in for Satan, and so you would have made that connection. Well, here's the other connection. Leviathan is the greatest of all the water monsters, right? It's considered the king of the water monsters. It's the largest, it's the most powerful, it's violent, it's the ultimate chaos creature. So it's the ultimate water monster. I would argue that Leviathan is was a real species of creature, is still a real species of creature. It is they're surviving mosasaurs, and people encountered them and they're like, that's Leviathan. Like again, it's a personification, right? So again, to the Hebrews, things had both a physical and a spiritual meaning. They're like, hey, they didn't look at the mosasaur and say, that is actually the Leviathan Chaos Conf Satan standing. Like, they didn't look and say that's Satan, but they're like, this creature is so powerful, so violent, so indestructible that it is Leviathan. They took the Chaos Conf name, Lotan, from the Ugaritic, and made it Leviathan. They're like, that's the same. It is the personification of that idea, right? It's sort of like when we say that man is an absolute beast, right? It's the same idea. We're not saying he's a literal monster, or if we say he's a monster, we're saying we're personifying. He's a personification of that idea. We're taking the idea and putting it on him as a descriptor. They're doing the same thing poetically. So Leviathan is the king of the monsters, right? The king of the water monsters. Remember, the ocean, the sea, that's chaos, that's evil, because man doesn't have dominion there. That's where man doesn't really belong there. It's full of creatures that will eat you and just destroy ships, right? So let's go back to the text. So the word here is tanin. That means water monster. Well, hold on. This begs the question. How does a water monster get into Babylon? Right? Babylon is in the middle of the freaking desert. It's literally, again, we're talking about Iraq here. Modern day Iraq. How does a water monster get into the desert? Well, answer, it doesn't get into the desert. It's not. It's not a desert creature. So what they're telling you poetically, what Isaiah is saying, if Satan, if the great evil adversary of God is Leviathan, who is the king of the water monsters, and I've just taken a water monster and plopped it into the desert, I can't be meaning a literal water monster. I mean a subordinate demonic entity. That is what Isaiah has done. So it changes the context of this whole thing. These wild beasts of the islands, right? He's not talking, because again, he's talking about creatures with doleful sounds, owls, right? And here's the thing. Let's go to owl, right? In 1321. It literally just means daughter, right? It doesn't not mean owl, but its primary meaning is daughter. It just means bath, right? It has, again, a lot of things. These are daughters. Well, what's a daughter? Why does that become an owl, right? Because again, they're looking for some way for this to make sense. And yes, there are times where it's like, well, if you connect it here to here, then it must mean owl. Well, that's not wrong, right? But it doesn't fit with the context of the thing. These doleful creatures, right? These are creatures that are making sounds. They're these nighttime sounds. So he's using the poetry of night, the desert, and he's giving us this concept, right? These are the creatures that moan in the night. These are demons, right? The Tanin, the water monster that's on land. It's a demon, and it actually gets even. And the thing is, he's setting you up in 13 for Isaiah 34. So let me pull up Isaiah 34. Share this tab. Okay, so Isaiah 34 is the ultimate. This is, in my opinion, describing the, again, dual fulfillment prophecy. He is talking about the end of the world. And just as a way of pointing this out, or the end of this world system. That's the best way to say it, right? This is the stuff that's going to happen in Revelation. And I would argue is still connected to the fall of Babylon the Great. This is connected to Isaiah 13 by I can never pronounce it. There, Idumea, and we'll come to that in a second. So this is a judgment of the nations, right? This is the indignation upon all nations that he's going to destroy them, right? And right here it says 34:4, and all the hosts of heaven shall be dissolved, and the heavens shall be rolled together as a scroll, and all of their hosts shall fall down, and the leaf as the leaf falleth from the vine, and as the fig from the fig tree. Does that sound familiar at all? Also, when he's talking about the slaughter uh, of the nations, he says, "Their slain also shall be cast out, and their stink shall come up out of their carcasses, and the mountains shall be melted with their blood." Again, poetic, but this is the book of Revelation. We see this. Jesus uses and references these verses when he's talking about the end of the world. Again, end of this world system. So here's where it gets weird. I love the fact that I'm saying I'm over here where it's like, for my sword shall be bathed in heaven. Behold, it shall come down upon Idumea. Maybe it's Idumea. Anyway, and upon the people of my curse to judgment. It's like, the sword shall be bathed in heaven. What is going on? And I'm down here over here. It's like, no, this is where it gets weird. It talks about how the unicorns shall come down with them, and the bullocks with the bulls, and their land shall be soaked with blood. So this is just the wild animals, these big, powerful beasts coming in and just tearing stuff up, right? But down here, it talks about, by the way, why do I connect all this to Babylon? Idumea is basically that southern region of Israel. It's where the Edomites were. That's basically the northern part of Saudi Arabia. Okay, where's Mecca? Mecca's in Saudi Arabia. Also, it talks about how the streams thereof shall be turned into pitch, and the dust thereof into brimstone, and the land thereof shall become burning pitch. It shall not be quenched night or day, and the smoke thereof shall go up forever, from generation to generation. It shall lie waste. None shall pass through it forever and ever. I would speculate that where it talks about streams thereof. Hold on. In fact, let me show you how to use it. So, the streams thereof. 51:58. Nakal, again, don't ever trust me. A torrent, a valley, a wadi, a torrent valley. But also as the stream bed or the shaft of a mine. But it also has some dubious meanings. A lot of people have also said that it's underwater, that it's underwater, under earth streams, right? Like rivers that run underwater. Well, let me ask this question. Is there anything Saudi Arabia is for that would be connected to pitch and that is underground and that can burn? And then when the fire has started, it's almost impossible to put out without explosives. Oh yeah, it's called oil. So just saying, I think this is a direct connection to Babylon. Babylon being utterly destroyed. Babylon being Mecca, being Saudi Arabia. Let's move down here. So people can't move through it. And then we get to this weird, where it gets really weird. Isaiah 34:14, right? Why, again, wild beasts of the desert shall also meet with the wild beasts of the island. That was all from Isaiah 13, right? And the satyr shall cry to his fellow. We have the satyrs again from Isaiah 13. The screech owl also shall rest there and find herself a place of rest. And then talks about how the great owl will make her nest and lay and hatch and gather under her shadow, and there shall the vultures also be gathered. So you could make the argument that this is right here, this great owl, these vultures, because it talks about hatching and nests and laying eggs. Maybe so these may be talking about natural creatures. Okay, I think there's an argument to be made there. I'm certainly not saying that there weren't natural creatures involved there, because these are creatures of night, creatures of the wilderness, metaphorically evil. Great. But right here it talks about in 34:13, it shall become a habitation of dragons. Again, dragons, as in 13, and a court of owls. Well, let's see what's going on here. So, fortress thereof, habitation for the... Okay. Dragons, again, Tanin. We already explained this. And a habitation of dragons, a habitation of Tanin in... Again, they're talking about Idumea. Idumea. I'm gonna go with Idumea. I like that. Sounds like something out of the Lord of the Rings. We're talking about Idumea here, right? So again, this is the desert. So Tanin, dragon, demon. It's still because Isaiah's building off of what's already occurred. So we know he means demon here. He doesn't mean a sea monster. And again, a court for owls. Again, bat. So this is the same. So again, same imagery as before. Okay, but again, bat. Why is Bath, which is usually a word that means girl? Why is it an owl here? All right. Next verse. So we can talk about the wild beasts of the desert and the wild beasts of the island, but there's really not much there. But the satyr, here's where things get interesting. Again, Sair. We click on it. What does it say? Devil. It's a hairy goat, a satyr. I mean, this is what it is. Sometimes it's a sacrificial animal, but it's all, and I love this, may refer to a demon-possessed goat, like the swine of Gadara. No, they mean the Shayadim. That's what this is. These are Shayadim. These are the goat demons, these goat spirits that are seen all throughout the Old Testament that the Israelites would go off and worship. I'm going to go one step further and say this is the thing that we're seeing in places like White Rock Lake, at Brown Springs. I would not be surprised if Brown Springs was a place for one of these spirits. Not necessarily a Nephilim, because again, demons and the Nephilim spirits, they don't have that kind of power. They are immaterial. They are invisible. They have to possess people. They don't have the ability to affect the outside world. These things do. These are Shayadim that he's talking about. So let's go back. And then we have the screech owl. So remember, Bath from earlier, a lot of people say, well, Lilith, it means screech owl. Does it? Lilith is associated with owls all throughout the Middle East. Yes, this is absolutely true. But it's not a screech owl. It is Lilith. It's a type of nocturnal demon. And no, I'll talk about Lilith and the whole myth of her being Adam's first wife. We'll get rid of that. We'll talk about that later. But Lilith is this. If you can look up Lilith, you'll see it's just one name for these female night goddesses, and she's always associated with owls and things like that. This is a Mesopotamian goddess, and they're connecting her directly to these demons. This means we should look at those owls and say they're not owls. They're talking about female demons. Now you may be saying, okay, Jason, that's great and all, but how can we know that the authors, that this is what they were thinking about, right? Because we can't. Are we maybe placing our ideas on the text, right? That's a great question. Remember how I mentioned that at the top you have the Masoretic text, and then down here we have the Septuagint. And I'll just skip ahead. You can hover over and see things, right? Verbs. By the way, Kai, let me just help you out. This means like the or and or stuff like things like that. Oh, look, it's a noun. This is literally just satyr. That's what this is. It's a goat. It's like a goat, or no, this one's like a donkey centaur, is what it is. This one, the word right beneath it, is basically the same word, but like a feminine version of it. I know it says plural masculine, but it's basically the female version of it if you really look into it. And you'll notice when you click it, there is no Strong's reference for this, because there's a lot of controversy as to what this word actually means. Well, this word right here is Lilith. It's the Greek translation for Lilith. This is just the female version of this word. That's all it is. It's a slightly different word, but it's still fundamentally the same word. It's sort of like even though it's masculine, it's basically the feminine version. It's different. It's the same thing but different. So if the and by the way, in Tanin also, we can do the same thing for Tanin, right? We go up here to the 13 where it talks about habitation of dragons, court of owls down here. Where'd he go? Plural name. This one. Yeah, that's the okay. So that's the court of owls. That's the owl. Where is it? I think it's this one. Anyway, the word is actually demon. Like that's the plural neutral. Where'd it go? Anyway, what is that? Accusative plural. No, that's not it. Anyway, irrelevant. But the point is, the word is actually literally in Greek demon. It is the word we get our word demon from. So we'll go ahead and pull that down. Hey CJ, hey, hello Nathan. And so the point here is a lot of these translators were trying to they're trying again, there's no translation, there's only interpretation. They were trying to get these ideas in, but they were missing the broad, some of them were missing that broader context of what Isaiah was doing with the poetry of saying, hey, these are demons, right? And so this is why we do need to we can spend you could probably spend your entire life studying Isaiah. You really could. There's so much there. But we need to be willing to, when we're researching these, go to things like blueletterbible.com and start looking those things up. Looking up, okay, when we see something weird, like why is he talking about owls? What's going on with the owls in the ancient world? Are there, again, why is Lilith there? What is Lilith, right? It's like, yeah, the word can technically mean screech owl if you wanted to, but in context, he's not talking about owls. He is talking about these female demons, right? He's saying all of these different demonic creatures, these, Tanin that are not, they can't be water monsters because they're on the land. He's connecting that to Leviathan and bringing them all together. He's saying this is going to be a place filled with evil and evil spirits, right? That's what he's saying. It's the imagery that's there, and we have to be able to start going. We have to remember the Old Testament is not written to us. It's written for us, but not to us. We have to start realizing that we need to read the Old Testament in its context, and then we can better understand what's happening in the New Testament. Again, it's very clear. From what I just showed, this destruction of Idumea. I like that. Yeah, we'll do that. Idumea. That's clearly the end of the world. It's clearly stuff out of the book of Revelation. He's connecting it deliberately with Isaiah 13. He's telling us Babylon here is not just Babylon. It's Babylon the Great, as John would call it. He's saying there's something bigger going on here, and the text expects you to pick up on that, to see that this is a bigger idea, right? So just a little thought for the day. It was just something that we talked about yesterday, and I wanted to go into more detail on it. So anyway, that's it. We'll go ahead and do the Lord's Supper, and then I have a question for y'all. So, but yeah, again, we need to be willing to explore the poetic nature of the Old Testament text and understand that they're using poetry to describe, because they want to talk about something bigger. For us, we tend to be so in the modern world, we're like, I want to write about a computer. I'm going to read about a computer. We're very functional. They were using poetry to talk about bigger things. And the text expects us to work with it and to wrestle with it, It's in the same way that Jacob wrestles with God. He wants us wrestling with the text. So, on that note, let us take a moment to clear our minds, our hearts for the Lord's Supper. Again, as I've mentioned before, I do it with wine and a tortilla, because a tortilla is basically just flatbread. That's all it is. It's actually very similar to what they would have eaten at the supper, but you don't have to use wine. You can use, like I said, you could use Coke and a donut if that's all you had available. But I do think we have some nominal obligation to try to be as close as we can when it's within our power. But the function isn't what's important, not the form, right? So we take this moment to remember Jesus' suffering on the cross, his whipped, his beatings, his whippings, his beatings, his humiliation for us. It was God's judgment poured on him. His life was given as an exchange for ours. His physical life for our eternal life, and then his resurrection is what cleanses us of the sin. He took that sin. He is the sacrifice and the high priest. And he's the only one who could, because he is also God. He was an eternal being in human form. He was fully human. He knew our sufferings. He knew our pains. He knew our frustrations. He knew what it was like to be human, to not necessarily know how the next day was going to go, to not, he had friends, he lost loved ones. This was his life. He understood our suffering and then died he died, an innocent man charged with a crime he did not commit. He was murdered by those whom he loved the most. He was betrayed by his own kinsmen. He was humiliated while the people who were supposed to be there for him, the people who were supposed to welcome him, the people who were supposed to be the closest to God, were the furthest from him. He descended into the land of the dead, to Sheol. He told those spirits in prison, he's like, I'm taking control of you now. It's not just I got you. You're not getting out. He was talking to those watchers. He became the new Enoch, and he's like, no, I got this. You're not escaping. Because I'm the authority now. He's the reason we can leave Sheol and go to heaven, to stand before God directly. It used to be humans couldn't. We had to go to paradise in Sheol. Our souls would live in the earth. Now we can go to God. We can stand before him. We are now not just servants of God, we are brethren of God. We are brethren of Jesus. We are God's children because of his pain, of his suffering. And this is what we remember, and we remember it to proclaim his coming. He is alive. He is ruling at the right hand of God. He is overseeing all things, and he's coming back soon. He is coming back to judge the living and the dead, and he is going to destroy this world system. We were just reading, he is going to roll the heavens up like a scroll. He is going to cast down the spirits that have, the spirits over the nations, the Deuteronomy 32 spirits that are over the nations. He's going to cast them down and inherit the nations. He's going to literally rain hellfire on this earth, and he is going to fix it. We proclaim the glory of his coming kingdom, and we do this to remember him, to remember the suffering that he took for us, and why he is worthy to be the king, the name above all names. The bread is his body broken for us, and the wine is his blood shed for us. It's a problem with corn tortillas. I can get stuck. He is coming. That is not a doubt. He will judge, and his kingdom will be righteous. We won't have to worry or put up with this stupidity that we're seeing right now. We will be ruled with justice and righteousness. And we will be a part of that kingdom. We will work as his kings and his priests. And we proclaim his coming. Amen. Okay. Before I leave you, I do have a question. So obviously I'm busy. Lots of things going on. Lots of things to do. And my question is this. Now that we're back on track with the Thursday night things, Sundays. How I need just you can type it in the description below or into the discussion. I'll be able to read it. Even if you're doing the if you're doing a replay, that's perfectly fine. Just you can type it in, I can see it. I need to be doing more with Siri papers. So my question is this. Would you like, or how would y'all feel if we stopped doing, if I pushed this back an hour, and instead of doing a second Not Another Bible Study broadcast on Sundays, we would do a Siri paper broadcast. It would be live, and we would talk about all the things that we talk about over there, right? Instead of doing them as pre-recorded, sort of more elevated things, that they would be live broadcasts to have the conversations about things like ancient alien or ancient astronaut theory in the Bible, UFOs, cryptozoology in the Bible. I just want to see what everyone's opinion is, because a lot of people are back to going to church, right? They've got their churches again. That's why I started doing this on the Sundays, was because churches had shut down. However, I do know some of you, that's not necessarily the case, right? So I have made 0 decisions. I just want to see what everyone's thought is. And just so it's like, if we did that, then we would do we would still do communion, but we'd do it on Thursdays, right? Like we would just do everything on a Thursday. So just that's it. Just throwing the idea out there. Just want to see what y'all say. Because again, Siri Papers is obviously, like, I want this to stay small. Siri Papers does need to grow, because that's the point, is for it to be out in the world having this conversation. So just like I said, I really do like this staying small. It doesn't mean I don't want y'all to share this with people that you think should need it, but I certainly don't want this to get like 400 people. Then we can't have these kinds of conversations. We can't pray for one another the same way. But Siri Papers can get larger, and that can be more fun. Because that's the entire reason I do all these things is to be that voice in the community, right? It's to have that answer. So I just want to see everyone's response, and I'll make a decision in the near future, probably a couple weeks from now. So just throwing that out there. I will see y'all on Monday with Texas Front Porch, and I am going to be, of course, obviously we've got Wednesday. We have a new Wednesday night show, Jason McLean Questions Everything, and I will be tonight on Daniela, finally, after like a month of being gone. And I don't know if we have a guest, but I did get in the salad cream and the HP sauce. So we're going to be doing, right, I'll be making 2 different sandwiches, and I will be, I will be making them according to Daniela's specification. So I can have the most British encounter with these. I will be tasting them first time live on television, and so we can discuss what they taste like and do the usual, you know, tomato thing we do. So it'll be a lot of fun. I hope to see y'all there if you can. But I will see y'all I'll see. Trust me, I know I'll see. I'll see all of y'all at some point in the near future. Let's remember again. I'll be sending out funds for Alan on Friday afternoon. Even $5 means a great deal to him. Let's keep the Ukrainians, the Ukrainian people in our prayers, and the Russian people in our prayers. But let's also pray against the evil of the governments of this world, and that does include ours. Like if you're paying attention, things are looking pretty bad, and the evil of our governments is what caused this tragedy in the first place. So we need to start praying in earnest about this. And this is actually something I'm going to be doing a deep dive on. In that it also connects to things like Brown Springs. Like, what power do we have? Because whatever's at Brown Springs is not a demon. It's a shayadim. It's much higher, much more powerful. It has authority to be there. So I'm going to be reading up on that kind of thing. But let's definitely pray against the evil, and that we pray that God will send peace and a cessation of violence, and that He will ultimately bring justice. Although we do know a lot of this stuff has to happen, right? But what we're praying for is an end to suffering. We're going to pray for an end to the injustice of this world. But like I said, I'll be doing a deep dive, and we'll be talking about all that kind of stuff here shortly. So again, if you're watching the replay, you can just type in your answer on my question in the chat, and I'll make a decision in the future. Love all of y'all. Y'all be good.